Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and to today's video where I'm going to be sharing with you some tips and techniques that I used for drawing this robin. This was actually a piece that I drew with my patrons for our last live draw along session. If you fancy joining live draw along sessions and drawing things like this, then hop on over to my Patreon. All of the details are in the description below that you need. But I'm going to get straight into telling you guys exactly what I've done with this robin. So as always, I've started with the eyes. If you want to learn more about how to draw eyes and all of that in general, I have tons of videos over on my channel. I've covered it in depth a lot. Cat's eyes, dog's eyes, bird eyes are really easy because they tend to be just really beady black dots. So this was mainly created with some dark sepia, and the highlights were created by using some light cold greys and also some light ultramarine as well. The beak was kind of created in the same way, in the fact that I put down light layers of cold grey, slowly got darker, added in all of the darker details as well, so like the beak line that determines the upper beak and the lower beak, any shadows on the underside of the beak. I left a little patch of paper white so that I could get the highlight of the beak and then filled that in with light ultramarine. So just paying attention to the lights and the darks. The darks are mainly on the underside of the beak and the lights are on the top, so I just made sure that I kept that in mind when adding down my colours. I focused mainly on creating the brown and the grey toned feathers on the robin first. So I started with the grey and the brown on the head and the wing. So for the grey areas, what I did is put down a layer of cold grey 1 followed by cold grey 3 and added in some of the shadows. And then in the brown toned areas, I actually added down some ivory first of all. Then I went in and distinguished like all of the little feather separations and any small details that were on the feathers, and I used a really sharp burnt umber pencil for that. So it's really important to get those details in so that you don't lose them later on. So what I do is I put down my base layer and then I go in with my really important shadows with the darkest pencil that I have in my predetermined list of colours. In this case it was the burnt umber, and just made sure that I got all of those little details in, because I find that when I work from light to dark and I don't put in all of the dark details, sometimes I forget where they're supposed to be, and that can kind of alter the form and structure of the piece that you're working on. So I like to put down a base layer or no base layer and fill in the little tiny bits of really important shadows and really important details first with the darker pencils, and then go in and work your way up to darker, so filling in those mid-tones and everything. For the grey toned feathers on the chest, I've used the light layers of cold grey 1 and cold grey 3, and I've put down a really light glaze of some purple violet and some light ultramarine to give a really nice blue tone. I wanted to incorporate a lot of blues into these particular feathers because I really wanted to accent the orange breast of the robin. So when you put down blues and oranges next to one another, because they're complementary colours and opposite each other on the colour wheel, they're going to really boost each other when placed next to each other. But when you place them over the top, which is what I've done when we come to the orange feathers in the breast, I've put orange down and yellow, and then I've put blue over the top to create some shadows. And when you do that, it creates a really nice grey tone or a neutral tone, rather than going in and using a lot of greys. Putting complementary colours on top of each other will just really help to relieve any muddiness, just kind of make it look a lot more dynamic, and just get rid of using all of those colours to create a shadow when you can just use the complementary colours to create a shadow, and it's a lot more effective. I do go in and use like dark sepia in that here and there to really darken things up, but for the main majority of shadows and creating like that darker area, I just used some complementary colours. So I've also done that in the underside of the body here. I've put down some yellow and then I've put blue over the top to just kind of add a little bit more of a grey tone. Also using blue and yellow together creates a little bit more of a green tone, which is what I kind of wanted with the robin in this particular area, in these lighter toned feathers coming down the back here. For the tail, you can see the kind of structure that I've done. Again, I'm adding in the darkest areas first, and then I'm going in with a base layer using the ivory, and then just going back in and blending everything through and adding in the mid-tones, and just making sure that all of those darker areas are really dark as well. and then just making sure that I blend everything. For blending in this particular drawing, I've used a mixture of the lighter pencils that I have used, so Cold Grey 1 and Ivory, and I have touched a little bit using a Holbein soft white pencil here and there as well. You can see as well, I'm just going in with some blues on the chest of the bird, making sure that all of the shadows are right where the wing is sitting over the top of that area. And then finally we get to adding in the very, very fun part. So the reason I did it this way round, usually I kind of work on like from the beak and then come down, but I decided to work on all of the greys and browns because I wanted to get like the boring areas out of the way first, and then I could work on these really fun oranges. So for the orange, I didn't put a base of grey or ivory down, I just went straight in with my lightest yellow pencil, and then I've just slowly built up the layers. So I've used a couple layers of yellow, then I've gone in with my lightest kind of orange tone, and then slowly got darker through the orange tones, working mainly in the areas where he's got some shadow or some little details. I've used some red as well to help with those shadows. You can see here I get out my colour wheel, and then we choose some blue and purple colours to go in there and create those shadows. So I'm using some dark indigo, and I think I also use a little bit of purple violet and light ultramarine as well. But you can see hopefully what a difference just using some blue makes rather than going in with grey, because grey on top of the orange, although it will create like a neutral tone, it's a bit more of like, it's not a natural looking neutral tone. I don't know, when you mix complementary colours together you just get a little bit more of a sense of it looking natural, and it just creates a little more interest to the image as well than just using flat greys. I've used a lot of greys and everything through the wings and through the other parts, so I just thought I'm going to take the blues that are in those grey parts and bring them into the orange, so that we've got the blue next to the orange and also the blue in the orange, so we're really bringing through that colour palette that I've previously chosen. So you can see on my list of colours all the predefined colours that I've used or have selected that I'm going to use for this drawing. In terms of the technique for the feathers, all I've done is just made sure that I'm working and shading my pencil in the direction that the feathers are going, so on the wing, kind of coming down towards the lower left hand side, and on the chest and everything just coming like straight down, and making sure that I follow the curvature of the bird. You can kind of see how his chest kind of curves out, so I'm making sure that I was kind of following that route. And then just making sure that I'm shading back and forth using a really light pressure and light motions. Where I do have some dark areas, I have gone in with a little bit of a harder pressure, but just making sure that I'm following those shapes and everything of the bird and shading in those directions in order to get that form in correctly. And then for the details, I've just used a sharp pencil and added in really tiny little marks, held my pencil a little bit more upright to really get the point of the pencil down on the paper and get a bit more control, and then used some really tiny little lines and everything to get those individual little feather sections in there. The last part of this drawing was the branch, and I didn't want to spend too long doing this particular section because I wanted the main focus to be the robin himself. I spent a lot of time making sure that his feet were correct though, because bird feet are one of the things I really hate doing on a drawing, so I just spent a little bit of time here making sure that they curved around the branch and looked nice in relation to the bird itself. And when we add in that branch, I add a little bit of shading underneath them and everything as well. But for the actual branch, I just used a lot of shading back and forth, again kind of following the direction that the branch is going, and just made sure to follow the light direction on the reference photo. So in this case, the light was kind of coming from above. You can see on the branch that I've already added, I've got a lot of the lighter tones on the top of the curving branch, and then underneath we've got a lot of shadow. So I've kind of just followed that through, and that's what we do with the other branches as well. So on this branch that you can see me filling in here, I'm adding in all of the darker tones to the underneath. I've already put a base tone down of some Cold Grey 1, and then I'm just going in with some nougat and some burnt umber and really filling in those darker tones and making sure that the branch is a lot darker on the underside. I also go through the branch and add tones of red, blue and yellow to create some shadow. So the blue and the yellow I use to try and create a little bit more of a green tone, because we've got some green tones that I created going on in the robin, and I wanted to mimic that through the branch as well. So on this last little section of branch that comes up through the wing there, I use a lot of red blue and yellow together to try and create this brown tone. When you use primary colours together as well, you do create a little bit more of a brown tone because you're mixing them all together, and that's kind of what I've tried to accomplish here. So I'm using a lot of red because there was a lot more of a red warm tone shining through on the branch, so the predominant colour here is red that I've used, and then I've just used the yellow and the blue combined to make a little bit of a soft green, just to give the branch a little bit more colour. And then I've also included those reds, blues and yellows into the shadow areas that I had already gone in with a burnt umber. So adding in those three colours over the top, it just helps to enrich the shadow and just makes it look a lot more better to look at. So it looked a bit kind of boring and plain to begin with just the browns, but by adding in all of these other colours, it just gives it a little bit more interest. It also ties the colour scheme from the robin into the branches as well, so I'm always looking at ways in which we can include colours in all of the areas, whether that's in the shadows or whatever it is. So I've included a lot of the colours from the robin into the branch as well, just to really help tie everything together, and I think the final outcome does actually look really nice, and I'm really pleased with this one. It was just a really small, simple tutorial. I actually used my own reference photo for this as well, but it took just under 2 hours in total, and I think the outcome is really quite nice for such a simple, small drawing. I was thinking of adding in some berries and things to kind of give it a bit more of a scene, so perhaps if I wanted to include this on a Christmas card or something like that, I can add in some red berries, but I've actually decided against that now, and I'm just keeping it as it is because I think it's really effective and you get the full force of the robin with just how it is now. Yeah, I just think it's a really nice little exercise. It was really good to kind of teach my patrons and students about the colour theory and the choices with what I was doing here by adding the blues into the chest and the blues into the orange as well. Just a really nice overall experience of how to create this small little guy. So I really hope that you have enjoyed this tutorial. If you have, make sure you give me a subscribe and a like, and drop me a comment down below of what you would like to see next, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Bye.